The Secrets of Star Wars is brought to you by the StarQuest Production Network and is made possible by our many generous patrons. If you'd like to support the podcast, please visit sqpn.com/give.
I am Emily Swallow, also known as the Armorer on The Mandalorian. And I'm just giving a little shout out to the Secrets of Star Wars podcast because this is the way.
Hello there.
It's a power that Jedi have that lets them control people and make things float.
Impressive. Every word in that sentence was wrong.
Help me, Obi-Wan Kenobi. You're my only hope.
This station is now the ultimate power in the universe.
I find your lack of faith disturbing.
It's against my programming to impersonate a deity.
That's not how the Force works.
Force is with me, and I am with the Force, and I fear nothing.
Remember, the Force will be with you, always.
You're listening to The Secrets of Star Wars, where we talk about everything connected to that galaxy far, far away. From movies, books, TV shows, and more, we are looking at the deeper themes and meanings found in the Star Wars universe. Be sure to follow The Secrets of Star Wars. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, your favorite podcast app, or on the StarQuest YouTube channel. You can follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/StarQuestMedia, on X, where we are at SQPN, or on Instagram, where we are at StarQuest Network. And, of course, be sure to get your official Secrets of Star Wars gear at SQPN.com/merch. It's a great way to support our show and show your love for Star Wars. All right, so this is an episode I've been looking forward to for a long time. And joining me tonight on the panel are Kathryn Laffrey. Hello, Kathryn.
Hello.
And Patrick Mason. Hello, Pat.
Howdy, Tom.
So, yes, today we are discussing Genndy Tartakovsky's first 2D animated Clone Wars microseries that aired on Cartoon Network in 2003. This is before the well-known and popular 3D animated Clone Wars series. And this show had huge nostalgia value for me. But before we get into all that, I have a brief recap of this first batch of episodes. So as the Clone Wars rage across the galaxy, Jedi Padawan Anakin Skywalker struggles to prove himself as a warrior and leader. His master, Obi-Wan Kenobi, believes the young prodigy to be too immature to take on serious responsibility. Gee, I wonder why. But Chancellor Palpatine promotes Skywalker to commander of space forces at the Battle of Mutilanst. As Kenobi and clone ARC troopers battle against the hordes of droids on the ground, Anakin skillfully leads the dogfight in orbit. Obi-Wan defeats the bizarre bounty hunter General Dirge and secures the surrender of the banking clan. But Anakin is baited into pursuing a mysterious starfighter into hyperspace to parts unknown. Meanwhile, conflict rages on other planets, like Mon Calamari, Dantooine, and Ilum. Anakin's chase leads him to Yavin 4, where he duels the assassin Asajj Ventress, the new Sith protege of Count Dooku. While Anakin ultimately wins the fight, he does so by tapping into the dark side of the Force, channeling his rage to defeat Ventress. Far away on the planet Hypori, a group of Jedi, including Ki-Adi-Mundi, Shaak Ti, Aayla Secura, are cut off and surrounded, and at the mercy of the new Separatist commander, General Grievous. The ruthless cyborg handily vanquishes the Jedi Knights, and on Coruscant, Master Yoda senses the rising darkness of the Sith.
Dun, dun, dun.
Dun, 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 dun. So, all right. Do you guys have memories of watching this series when it premiered on Cartoon Network back in the day? Because I sure do, and it was genius viral marketing for the prequel movies, actually. But yeah, I remember sitting in front of the TV waiting for these little 5-minute shorts to come on. What about you guys?
I think we scheduled life around it. Once we heard it was happening, it's like I had, a 3-year-old, a 5-year-old, and a 7-year-old at the time, so it's like, okay, wait, we got to make sure that we're right in front of the TV at this time right now.
Yes. When you actually had to be sitting in front of the TV at a specific time for something that was not live sports or something like that,
Yeah. No streaming it later.
No. Is this part of Toonami? Was it part of Toonami? I'm trying to remember because, like, I remember my watching habits.
So.
I don't think it was,
because I think it was later than Toonami, like later in the evening than Toonami.
I just remember it being between other shows.
Yes.
We didn't watch a lot of Cartoon Network, but we heard about this and it was like, okay, quick, turn the TV on at this time. And go.
Channel 32, where I was. Tune in because Toonami was in the early afternoon and evening, and I feel like this was almost at like 8 or 9 o'clock or something.
Okay,
if I remember right. Yeah, and it was
most of the time
2 other shows. Yeah,
most of the time I caught it were probably reruns over weekends. And so I would just be sitting there like watching channels or surfing through things, and suddenly it would come on. And I remember very distinctly, I had very little conception of like planning watching TV at that age. And so like and I would just catch them randomly. I'm like, that was the best thing ever. Why was it only 5 minutes?
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
I still remember the first one ending going, wait, what? Wait, that was it? 3 minutes? No. But then anytime you like, the next time it was on, you hear the static and then the march of the droid army. It's like, yes, we get 3 more minutes.
And I remember just being this put me off the 3D Clone Wars show for a long time because I was like, it's too different. It's not like the 2D ones. It's not as action packed. There's more Senate baloney and like all that stuff. I don't care. I just want these action packed gut punch episodes like they used to do with the 2D ones. And so like that put me off 3D Clone Wars for a while, honestly. But yeah, I loved these, and I was a fan of Genndy Tartakovsky's work before this show, like because he did so much on Cartoon Network. He was involved with stuff like Dexter's Laboratory and Samurai Jack.
Samurai Jack.
Ooh, yeah. And that's something we got to review on SQPN, by the way, Samurai Jack.
I was thinking to myself, I'm like, have we done Samurai Jack? Because if we haven't, I don't even think like a single episode is enough. There's just so much to
No, we have to do season by season with Samurai Jack. Yeah, because there's just, and Samurai, as I'll get into later, there's a lot of influence from Samurai Jack on this show.
Yeah.
It was on at the same time, and you can see, like, I can see Samurai Jack doing stuff, the same stuff with his katana that the Jedi are doing with their lightsabers in this and flipping around and all that stuff. And, what other shows was he doing? Oh, yeah, like Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends. Yeah, the Powerpuff Girls.
Yeah.
And his recent show, Primal. Ooh, I love Primal. That show was made for me because it's like Samurai Jack, but it's about a dinosaur and a caveman fighting monsters in a primeval world. And I'm like, plug this into my brain. I'm like, that's great. So Tartakovsky's a master of visual storytelling, and Primal almost takes something from this show and clocks it up to 11 because I'll get more into this later, but that sequence with the ARC troopers, the clones with almost no dialogue, that's all of Primal. Primal has very minimal dialogue.
Yeah.
And what dialogue there is, none of it's in English. So Tartakovsky can tell you a story without any dialogue, and that's amazing.
Yeah. That's true not just of that one scene. If you watch the show, there's a lot of noise, right? And one of the things about the ARC Trooper episode is that it has a very distinct time frame of noise and no noise, right? And the talking is part of that. But even the other episodes, there is very little dialogue. Most of the noise you hear are blaster bolts. That's the vast majority of it. I think the episode with Mace Windu doesn't have a single word.
It doesn't. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I think, if I remember correctly, the only spoken words in the Mon Calamari episode is Yoda telling the story before the action happens. The rest of it is completely silent from a dialogue perspective. So that was always very interesting. And I think one of the reasons it's such a difficulty bridging the gap between this series and the 3D is because the 3D is very talky.
Yeah.
There is a continuous line of dialogue that goes on in the 3D because they're working to tell the stories differently. But because it was kind of set up, and I don't know about you guys, but in my mind, like, I have not watched all of the Clone Wars 3D stuff.
Neither
in part because I don't want to erase the 2D stuff. Like, in my mind, that's still canon. Like, I know it's not, but it is.
In my mind, it's headcanon. Yeah. And they did actually redo a few of these arcs in the 3D show.
Yeah.
Mon Calamari and Ilum's very different, but they have Ilum, the planet where you make your lightsaber, in the 3D show.
Yeah.
So they definitely came back to a few of these.
This series actually gave me hope for someday seeing the Thrawn trilogy that was written by Timothy Zahn, the first one. Because there were bits and pieces of stuff introduced into this that more followed the Star Wars books that had been written leading up to the release of the prequels. And so I was like, okay, yes, this is all going to happen.
Anything in particular? Like,
for me, just a lot of it was just the way things were done. But there was one in particular is at the end of this first part was when Anakin is fighting at just lost the name.
Oh, Yavin 4?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because not the Timothy Zahn books, but then going into the Jedi Academy series. There was a major battle with a ghost of a Sith Lord, and it was very similar. So it just made me feel like the books that have been written are going to get worked in. And I was like, yeah.
And like I remember like pulling like little visual cues too, where it's like, oh, that reminds me of something from the books or something like that. Like, especially with, I'll get more into this later, but Grievous's first appearance, especially when they built up to that with viral marketing back then. Like that thing with the close up of his eye was like all over the viral marketing. But when Grievous first showed up, my first thought was, is he a craft war droid from the Sith Wars? Like from the comic books or something like that? That's what I was thinking of. So like, and they didn't even then, like they weren't really explaining Grievous much. They were kind of leaving that for the movies. But
it's funny that you mentioned marketing. Because on Wikipedia, they talk about this whole thing being a Hasbro marketing push.
Oh, for the toys.
Yep. They said, you need to do something now to fill the gap. Because we need to do it for the toys. It was super successful with the Transformer toys, and I think you need to do this. And that was like the big push behind producing these. Supposedly.
That's interesting. But it doesn't feel like a hack thing.
Right.
It feels it's quality and it's good and it's,
they brought in the right people to do this.
Exactly. Yeah. It's better than a toy driven show has any right to be,
Yeah.
Well, it's kind of like, you have those conversations and you see the executives go, all right, fine, just, hire somebody to do it versus, one of them going, okay, well, who do we know who can do short form storytelling that'll showcase the toys well? We have somebody in mind. Like it's kind of that search for the creative team. Like, is it just thrown together or did you actually put a little bit of thought into it? You can tell they put a lot of thought into this one.
Honestly, I wish some of these sequences had been in the prequels.
Yeah.
I feel like that, especially the lightsaber duel between Anakin and Ventress, I felt that pushed Anakin's story along better than his duel with Dooku in episode 2. Like, where he really taps into the dark side and feels that power that comes from his anger, you know? And I'm like,
almost see a parallel between those two fights. It's almost like George Lucas wanted that too, to make sure that people saw that.
He might have, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And you could see where they were taking things too. I don't know if you guys used to have the concept art books for the prequels, but like they were taking stuff like Ventress had been her character is based on concept art for episode 2 that didn't get used. And this was her first appearance in anything. She's not named in this, but, and I like her.
Did name her?
No, I don't think they name her once in dialogue.
Oh, okay.
They just call her child or assassin or apprentice. And like, I liked her, like, I liked her as kind of like Dooku's acolyte. I thought that was a neat story for her. And also just random bit of trivia. When Dooku lands on that weird planet where the gladiator games are being held, when this originally aired on TV and he goes over to that weird, like, fish alien who's dressed like he's a pope or a patriarch or something. In that scene, originally there was no subtitles to show what he said. So it just looks like Dooku walks up to this guy and he's Count Dooku. And it looks like Dooku did not understand any of that because he just gives a non-committal answer. He goes, indeed. And that's still my headcanon that Dooku didn't understand any of that gibberish that guy said.
I didn't think he cared about any of it. He already knew what he was looking for. Yeah, it's like, whatever, dude, ramble on.
Yeah. And that whole fight scene, like all of those characters in the gladiator pit could have been enemies from Samurai Jack. And that whole fight had a very Samurai Jack feel to it. So, yeah, I like that. Yeah. So much going on in this show.
Yeah. Well, and you talk about Ventress, like she manages to bridge the gap almost immediately from this into actual Clone Wars. Because I want to say she's episode 1, 2? Like she shows up pretty early. And
it's the first arc with like Yoda. Yeah.
Like she's and so you can tell they made kind of a fan favorite, you know, sort of Sith with her. I love that she starts out the first 2 lightsabers she has, it's a blue and a green, right? Which tells you something very specific, and that is she's killed 2 Jedi or she stole them, which I don't know about that one, but like she is a very obviously powerful and worthy opponent, and she's been trained and she thinks she's Sith. So there's a lot of question marks to her backstory.
Yes.
And I always wondered what they were going to do with her, if they were going to do more. And it was nice to see that she came into the canon via Clone Wars.
And it's nice that, you know, as early on as this, they had to figure out how to explain how she dies over and over and over again, but still comes back.
Yes.
Because she made it all the way to our crazy band of brothers there in the
Bad Batch. Yeah.
Bad Batch, yeah.
She's definitely a fan favorite recurring character. One character who is a favorite of mine who has not yet recurred in anything except comic books is Dirge. Dirge is all now. His species has appeared again.
Oh, it has.
His species, the Genndy, as they're called, they're very rare in the galaxy, but they made a Genndy warrior made an appearance as a major boss in one of the new Star Wars games, Jedi Survivor. Okay. But it's not Dirge, it's a different Genndy warrior. But he has that same thing where he can regenerate, he's purple, and can turn his arms into where he can become John Carpenter's The Thing and turn like his arms like tentacles and stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah. I think he's a cool opponent. I wanted Dirge to be in like the Mandalorian or something as like a bounty hunter boss enemy, because like he's like the Swiss Army knife opponent.
Right. Like he's a very Mandalorian-ish guy, right? And he's got a helmet. He's got a flying booster pack. He's got a flamer on one hand. He's got a grappling hook on another. He's got the dual pistols.
The whistling birds.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so he had at first, the more I watched this, and this was before all of the Mandalorian kind of development stuff we had in Clone Wars and then since in the Mandalorian show. So you kind of get the feeling like, whoever made the character was probably like, let's make a bad guy Mandalorian. And also make him this weird, creepy Akira style monster thing.
And don't forget his chopper-like speeder bike.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And his IG Lancer like droids that are his cavalry. That whole speeder bike cavalry thing is ridiculous and preposterous, but I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah. The most
Not
fun
very
thing
effective,
ever.
but fun.
Yeah.
But they were like super effective in the battle, like on both sides.
Yeah, and like you get to see Obi-Wan in clone armor, which was neat. My brother's response to that was Qui-Gon would be ashamed, and I'm like, probably. I'm like,
nice.
I think visually that's possibly one of my favorite sequences is the cavalry or the speeder cavalry.
Yeah.
And I don't know what it is about the IG droids. From a style perspective, they are 1,000% my favorite droid styling. And so watching them ride speeder bikes with lances, I'm just like, this is the most ridiculous combination of things I love.
Yeah.
And then watching them charge each other and
it is so many sequences in this. You're like, that is highly impractical and ridiculous. But like, okay, so on Dathomir, the Separatists have this preposterous weapon that basically they just drop a big weight onto the ground.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Crater to happen, and then I was saying, like, imagine the amount of lubricant that make that thing go up and down, like it. But also it's so slow and vulnerable, like, and when it crashes and explodes at the end, it's taken out in 5 minutes by one Jedi, Mace Windu. And my brother says, because we were watching it earlier today, he's like, there goes 1 trillion credits of Separatist money up in flames.
Yeah.
But that had some of the best tie-ins. I mean, you have the little kid watching the whole thing who's dressed like Luke Skywalker from a scene that was cut from A New Hope.
Oh, he's the hat. That's right. Yes.
Yep. He's got the farm boy outfit on. And then when it ends and you have Mace Windu like standing there with him, you get the thanks, Mean Joe Green.
Yes. Yep.
I was like waiting for him to toss him a Coke or something.
That's right. Exactly. I was like, oh, he's about to give him a Coke.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I loved Mace Windu's force food that he does.
Right, when he's blowing up all the droids, because when he loses his lightsaber and he's just like pummeling the droids with his hands. It's a pretty amazing sequence.
Yeah, he pummels them with his hands and like does this thing where he pulls all the bolts out of one of them and it falls to pieces. And then he uses all the bits as shrapnel to shred a bunch of other droids.
Yeah. Yeah, it was after that scene when we were watching. My kids were, or one of my daughter, she was like, "Why does he even need a lightsaber? Like, why even use the lightsaber?" Yeah. It's like he's just taking them apart. And I was like, "Well, the lightsaber makes it a little easier."
Yeah, the other thing I was thinking is that like Samuel L. Jackson wishes he had this scene in live action.
Yeah,
like,
oh yeah,
because he's like an action actor, and they didn't really use him for that. But yeah, it was I just love that whole sequence because, like you said, Pat, there's no dialogue in it, none at all. And well, the only dialogue is from like the ridiculous like B-1s on the ship as they as they die ridiculously. Like, I love it. It's like with explosions all over. We are losing control. What? And then like he dies.
His head gets cut off.
His head gets cut off. Yeah,
I absolutely love that. Like and it shows an actual one of the few comparable is not the word, competent, one of the few competent droids. Like the lightsaber comes through the hole and cuts one of them like in half, and the one standing next to him immediately hits the alarm panel. Like it's time to sound the alarm. And it was like, oh hey, a competent droid.
Yeah, finally one of them is like, oh wait, I should signal for an alert for help.
Yeah. No, I loved that, and it's interesting because the whole show plays back and forth between these short form and long form vignettes, and you're never absolutely certain if you're at like the end of the story, because a lot of times it sort of feels like, you know, the bad guys are winning or the good guys are winning or somebody's won. And, you know, I think that was one of the ones with Mace Windu where that was it. Like him taking on the droid army, you know, and initially he has all those clones with him, but after the first sand tsunami that occurs because of that giant dropped weight, which, I mean, the amount of power you need to pick that thing back up, dropping it doesn't take a lot, but picking that thing back up,
gravity. Yeah.
Yeah. It's an enormous amount of power going into something like that. And interestingly enough, that's something they're looking at for power storage purposes, for long-term power storage, is to try and get away from batteries. But
what?
Yeah, basically lifting weights, like using the power to lift a weight, and then you let the weight come down. You somehow transfer that energy into a turbine, into a generator. Basically, it's kind of like a spinning flywheel sort of a thing. Like if you were to attach a set of gears to the thing coming down.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of like how an elevator works, basically. In a lot of ways.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Wait, so it's like that meme with Schwarzenegger, right? I pick things up, I put them down, but you're using that to power something.
Yeah, using that as an electricity source.
Yeah. Can you hear us, Kathryn?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. That's fixed. We were just talking about Mace Windu using the Force Fu on the droids, and also that crazy weapon that that they use. But yeah, do you guys have any other favorite moments, you know, from any of the episodes, or favorite sequences that you guys like?
Oh, I loved when we were on Mon Calamari.
I loved all the droid designs in that.
Oh, it was great. And then just the introduction of Fisto.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my gosh. My oldest daughter's going to be so mad at me. But she thought he was the coolest thing she had ever seen at the time. She was like, oh my gosh, Mom, he's the best Jedi ever.
He was pretty cool in that sequence.
He was super cool.
And of course, he flashes his iconic Kit Fisto grin.
Yes.
Yeah.
At the end.
Yeah. And I loved his sort of aquamarine colored lightsaber that he can use underwater, his force bubble abilities.
Yeah.
It was really cool. And also just a neat thing that those Republic assault ships can actually land on the water. That was pretty.
I loved seeing that visual sequence of just here you have a spaceship landing on the water. It was just gorgeous. Actually rewatched it just to watch it again, that one sequence.
To watch them floating around. I like the introduction of the giant super cannon on the lobster legs.
Yeah.
As it crawled up from the depths. That was a pretty good sequence there.
The Separatists love their super weapons, apparently.
Yes.
The Empire learned it from them, I guess.
Yeah. Learned it from
they're
watching
so
you.
big and awkward. It's like, take one leg and down they go. You know?
Yeah.
I thought they don't recoil. How do those big machines don't have really bad recoil action on those? I mean, the stomper and then the cannon. It's like, I'm sorry. As soon as that thing shot off, it should have gone flying down the hole.
Okay, now I'm like not so much like lasers are weird that way, but like the stomper thing,
right?
Like if you don't just drop that, if it's still attached to your ship, there is a vibration recoil that would occur. Like it would go through the cylinder and then up through the ship itself. So
right.
All right.
Unless there's a force field, unless they're not using, because I was saying they must have gotten a ton of lubricant, but maybe there's like a force field in between the cylinder they're dropping and the ship, so it's sort of buffering
it's like a tractor beam, kind of a deal. Yeah. Okay.
Well, they must have some serious thrusters to keep it level, so it doesn't go flying up into space every time it stomps down.
Right. Yeah. I liked in the Ilum storyline, we got Anthony Daniels voicing C-3PO when they're on the planet, and of course, I love that he's just in everything. Whenever they need 3PO voice work, he's there.
Yeah.
And so that's great. And I love that Padme almost gets him killed.
Yes. Go get my cloak.
Oh, of course. And but then she throws a grenade that could have very easily destroyed C-3PO.
Yeah.
But she knows his maker.
Yeah. Yeah, that whole sequence was very Droids reminiscent for me.
I was thinking of that too. Yeah. It was a pleasure, Miss Padme. Like that could have been like the end of a scene in Star Wars Droids. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, it was
that
great.
whole scene making the lightsabers. I loved that scene. Just like getting their crystal, and the crystal's the part of the blade and the heart of the Jedi and all that stuff. You know, it almost made me feel sad when they didn't always follow that later on.
Right. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I want to say this is the first time we get that in anime, or not in anime, but in visual. Like, you know, I think we have it some of the extended universe books, but we don't have lightsaber making on screen until this. I think this is the first time it's done.
Yeah, I think so. And this is, I think, the first introduction of the temple on Ilum, where you get kyber crystals from. It shows up again in the 3D series, and then also in Jedi Fallen Order, the video game. But
is like per canon, is it the only place to get kyber crystals, or are there other places?
I feel like it's the biggest like vein of kyber is on. Oh, right, because you can also get them on Jeddah. Well,
yeah.
Oh, yeah,
because they were getting it from, there was like a mine below the old temple.
Yeah. Okay.
But I feel like Ilum is like the place, you know.
Well, it may have been like the one the Jedi were like, this is the place we're going to use, from now on. Or maybe Jeddah was for a while and then they moved it. I'm kind of interested in that now. If there's some lore out there.
Maybe the vein on Jeddah ran dry.
Yeah.
Have they ever done the story of discovering the kyber crystals and the first lightsaber?
Not in canon.
Well, yeah.
I would love that story. That'd be awesome.
I kind of feel like that's going to be, if they ever do that Origins of the Jedi movie, that will probably be part of that.
Yeah,
it's a guess, but yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, and it was neat that they decided to put like the big ground battle in this big empty city on Munilinst, so they could destroy anything they want.
Right.
Yeah. I really love the architecture of that city. It sort of screams bank.
Yeah, every building looks like a bank.
It's like a bank or a museum or a museum bank, some combination of the two.
Museum of banking.
Yeah. You probably have that on the Banking Clans world. It's the Museum of Banking.
And apparently in the current canon, I saw a video that explained this recently. Munilinst is not actually the Mun homeworld. It's their first extraplanetary colony.
Oh.
But it's where they have a lot of their institutions, like financial institutions, though. So that's an interesting little like lore bit. I like the guy who's when he's surrendering to Obi-Wan. He's like, "Have mercy, I'm only a banker."
Yeah,
like really.
Yeah, that was cool. I have to say, the culmination of all of this with Anakin and Ventress was just so good. And I love how, you go from the silliness of the banking clan guys and it all just kind of seemed silly. And then all of a sudden it just got real serious real fast with Anakin.
And it was neat to tie it back into the original trilogy and the extended universe stuff by setting it on Yavin 4, and especially from the extended universe stuff, that all the Sith the dark side energy is really strong on that planet. Because a lot of those temples were built by people who worship the Sith and stuff.
Yeah.
And so, like that was just a great setting for that fight. And I loved a lot of the visual things they did, like them fighting in the rain and seeing the mist come off the lightsabers. That was so cool.
The sound effects on that were incredible. Just incredible. Yeah, you can just close your eyes and just like see it. It's just like, yes, this is awesome.
And there was something very Kurosawa about parts of that fight. Like the long sequences where they just stand and like do a standoff.
Yeah. You see that with Mace Windu in the fight with the droids. Anytime there's a stop in the fight and everybody's just sort of paused. And I think at the point where Mace gets separated from the rest of the clones and he's sort of in the middle of all of the Mark II battle droids and they're all drawn on him. And it's just this waiting for that moment and then the go moment. Like it's very samurai, and that is, of course, based on all the old samurai movies where you would have this long span of tension building, almost nothing going on, which is also a Western, what they do in Westerns right before the shootout begins. And you see Yoda does it too. I think when he's got the, all of those droids, when he discovers they're there and he starts, there's this pause and he's just sort of doing nothing. And then all of a sudden, the lightsaber pulls out and he starts going to town on them, and they've got him surrounded. And Anakin, and then you see it played out here with Anakin and Ventress and sort of the who blinks first, which is always a big question mark in your mind. You know, between the Jedi and a Sith, it's always going to be the Sith who blinks first, right? Because theoretically, the Jedi's going to have control of his emotions in that situation.
Right. And the
but
Jedi
that's not where
philosophy
Anakin is.
Right, yeah. And their whole philosophy is the Jedi use the Force for knowledge and defense, never for attack. So, like, they won't initiate the conflict. But like you say, Anakin's not a conventional Jedi.
Yeah.
By any metric.
Yeah. I love how he gets goaded into this fight, you know, at the beginning in the space battle. And you can kind of, you see him get more and more committed to it as he's like, you know, I took my squad, like, we basically won the day and it's just mopping up at this point. And then I watch like this whole squad of guys get killed. And now it's a revenge thing, right? So she immediately puts him into that mind space. And then it's a cat and mouse. Oh, like, you're so good, but you can't get me. Which is why he eventually figures out, okay, this is not a droid, this is a Sith. But then they're fighting over and through a city. And I feel like if you're a hero, anytime you're put in a position where you're fighting in a city, like you should realize you've been goaded into a trap, like, because no matter what you're doing, you're putting innocent lives at stake. You know, and then the whole interplay between Obi-Wan and him during that fight that just sort of eggs him on and puts him like further and further into that space. And then you see almost the exact same thing play out planet side, because he gets there and then that whole squadron of clones shows up and then they all get picked off one by one. You know, the alien raptors get them.
Yeah.
You know, it's
don't
just
go into the long grass. You know,
right.
Yeah. Me and the kids were like making up names. Bill, Jim, Frank, no. Because they're all disappearing. But she puts him in the okay, this is not just about like a personal thing now. Like, you've killed all of these people who were here to help me, and then he's in his. And I want to say they do this where they have it play some of the conversations he had with Obi-Wan prior to him finding Ventress or during the fight. And so you have that whole egging him into this space of giving into the dark side. And I think all of the stuff they do with Anakin, both in this first episode and the second episode, it's pretty amazing work from a storytelling perspective to try and bridge the gap from where you are in episode 2 to episode 3.
Yeah.
Because there is a pretty significant gap between the two. And this set of stories does such a good job of bridging that gap. Which, that's why I have such a hard time with the Clone Wars.
Right.
And it's funny because I feel like with these stories, as opposed to the 3D Clone Wars, you get more of the bond between Obi-Wan and Anakin as brothers. And that was like, if you had only watched the movies, you're like, what? How are they close?
Yep.
You know, but then when you see this and you do see the closeness, it's like, okay, now you can see how there's that band of brothers kind of feel.
Also, I like just in the dogfight scenes, you know, we finally get that proof of what Obi-Wan says in episode 4, that Anakin was the best star pilot in the galaxy. You know, you really see it, that he is the best of the best. You know, like you say, Pat, that's part of the reason why it's easy to egg him on with Ventress, who's also really good. And while it's partly about revenge, it's partly about, like, I'm going to get this person, whoever it is. You know, like, this person is going to best me.
Yeah. I like how he kept saying he's really good, or there's something different about him. And then he goes, I think it's a she.
Right. And you can definitely see how his pod racing skills play into his skill as a fighter pilot. You know, he's making the kind of turns that like only a Jedi or a droid could accomplish, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Split second.
The rest of us would be paced.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I remember, like, for me, though, the highlight of this first arc of episodes was always the final one with General Grievous and his introduction, because I wasn't they introduced a new, and it was also why I was so disappointed when I finally saw episode 3.
Oh yeah,
it was
I'm
such
right
a
there with you.
letdown. Yeah,
I was just like, really, yeah,
really, yeah. You know, like,
well,
it was such a letdown.
And it came right after a letdown that happened right before it, which was Anakin's mediocre space piloting skills. And it's sort of like,
yeah, like, because I loved everything about his design was killer. His, like, and especially in this where he has the white cape, he's all white, like a reverse Vader. You know, who's in all black. He's in all white. You know, he doesn't have the black cape like he does in episode 3 and the later Clone Wars TV show. And he's in this, he's a force of nature. You know, this felt like, and maybe it was because I was watching a lot of Toonami at this time, this felt like the introduction of a new DBZ villain. Because in Dragon Ball Z, if you want to introduce a new villain, you take several characters that the audience knows are powerful, and then have that new villain wipe the floor with them. And that's exactly what happens in this. And as my brother pointed out when we were rewatching this season today, he's like, they spend most of these episodes building up for the audience this idea that the Jedi are invincible.
Yeah.
Because they do so many amazing feats throughout all these episodes. And then they end it with Grievous taking a group of mostly powerful Jedi, except for a few, you know, and picking them apart piece by piece. And it wasn't even a contest. And you had like Jedi Masters like Ki-Adi Mundi, Shak Ti, Ayla Sakura in that group, and they don't last seconds against Grievous. Yeah.
Well, Grievous hit him in the mind first.
Yes, the psychological warfare.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. And you see that poor little Padawan. What was his name? Shaggy?
Like, that's actually his name. If you look on Wikipedia.
That's amazing. Yeah.
That is actually the artist
Shaggy. You can look it up.
Shaggy. Oh.
Yep.
In the making of video.
Sorry.
Yep. But in the making of video, he says the way he styled this also was tribute to the old Warner Brothers cartoons also. Just and Hanna-Barbera and all of that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So yeah, that was a big influence on him because he loved the 2D animation and just wanted to like really bring it to its full, right down to hand sketching a lot of this and then digitizing some parts.
Yeah, like Kathryn, tell us more about the behind the scenes stuff, because I know you watched a lot of that in preparation.
Oh my gosh, yeah, it was. I mean, that's my first thing to do. If I have a DVD, I want behind the scenes stuff because I always wanted to be a storyboard artist or work behind the scenes on some great movie. I would have been gladly throwing mugs for the Green Dragon if I had the chance. But yeah, it's neat to see the behind the scenes, how they approach it, to know that, you know, they had the technology, they could have done all this computerized, but to see them sketching things out, to see that he was sketching things out on Post-it notes. I'm like, thank goodness I'm not the only artist that loves to sketch things out on Post-it notes. Best sketch tool around. And he would literally like arrange these Post-it notes. And then, how they would work out the fight sequences. So they get to like the major impact points of different fight sequences and working out who's going to be fighting who and stuff like that. So yeah, it's fascinating just to see the process behind it. If you have the chance, I don't know if it's on Disney Plus, but it's definitely on the DVD. It's worth finding the DVD if it's out there anywhere to watch.
Yeah. I know we have the DVD as well. Because as soon as that was available, I was like, need that.
Yeah.
You know, because I'd never seen them since they had aired originally. And I was like, that wasn't a fever dream, right? That happened.
It really did happen.
This really cool prequels thing did happen, right? You know?
Yeah.
The art on this is fascinating because I look at the art over the last couple of years, especially with the animated Star Wars, whether it's computer or anything. But to me, this feels like the iconographic Star Wars. It's 2D. It's giving you just the minimal so that the real depth behind it actually shines through better. And then you get into a little more 3D with the other Clone Wars series. And then you get a totally different feel with Rebels. And then that builds up even more in Bad Batch until you get to the live action stuff. So it's almost, you feel like you're walking through art history sometimes with some of this, where it's like working its way to like the High Renaissance or something.
Wow. Yeah.
I mean, look at Naboo.
Yeah, well, it's like you're so right that it almost, the way it's 2D, like the characters almost look very flat, but there's this depth behind it. It is like an icon almost, like.
Yeah, because having them 2D actually lets the character shine through. You didn't need Dooku to say anything. You didn't need him to move around a lot to get all that seemed to go on in his head when he's like watching the gladiators fight it out for his apprenticeship, or just even like subtle little things of Obi-Wan just lifting an eyebrow. Yeah, it was nice. I feel like sometimes that little less visual allows so much more story to come through.
They're very expressive. Yeah.
And I love it because, well, and it's fun. I love it because it does such a good job of using white space and not white space, it's white noise, but of using silence appropriately. And, you know, we live in the age of non-silence where just there's always noise of some kind, and it's difficult to appreciate, you know, the little noises that occur. I love the fact that they did a good job of incorporating those so that when it was quiet, like you could still hear like the wind blowing through the grass, you know, when it's just the kid and Windu standing there, even though that's a very quiet moment because it's not filled with laser blasters and typhoons of sand. And you have the same kind of feel with the animation because you have these long periods of no motion that occur, and it's in a lot of ways it feels very strange for animation because you're always like the thing that makes it animated is the fact that there's motion in the drawing, but you have these long spaces of no motion, but it's all done very well. You know, it's not, you know, I'm never at the point where I'm looking back and I'm like, oh, come on, you guys were just lazy. You didn't want to draw one more frame. You know, you're like, no, this was how it should have been done, kind of a feel to it.
Yeah, it's just, to me, it's just a masterclass in how you tell a visual story. I once saw a reaction video to this. And I believe it was in one of the early segments, like where the ARC troopers are patrolling through the city, and they're all using hand signals and no dialogue. And the person reacting was complaining that they weren't talking. And I'm like, it's visual storytelling, man. It's visual storytelling. Yeah. You can tell a story with no dialogue. There doesn't need to be a lot of chatter, you know, like. Yeah.
And it built up the intensity for when something happened next. You know, you have this quiet, they're working and they're in a stealth mode. It's like, okay, little with their hand here and there. And then it was fascinating. Just, yeah, like you said, you get the silence and then that burst of something's going to happen.
Yeah. I mean, you have a whole set of films based on that entire concept, which is the Quiet Place movie franchise, which is just a tour de force of playing with what can you do in silence, and then what is it like when you break that silence, And how does that look on, or what sort of emotional impact does that have to the audience? Granted, that's set in a horror setting, and this is a war setting, but it's still very, it's sort of like you almost feel like as the squad's making its way through the city and there's quiet stuff, you almost feel like you're shrinking. And everything's shot from these really wide angles, and they're in these plazas, or they're walking through these really large, even though they're alleyways, they're like 3 or 4 car alleyways, which, I mean, kudos to building a city correctly. Banking clan. You just feel very small, which you're supposed to, right? That's how because that's how they feel. They're these very tiny kind of insurgent force. And then when the noise happens, everything gets real big and you get real close. And like you're watching the guy, run up behind the droid tank and shoot into the top of it and fall down and shoot a bunch outside and jump out and run off and boom, and then silence again. And then we go back to wide angles.
Band of Brothers also did this very well in a war setting where, there would be scenes in combat where there was no music, and there were quiet moments where the guys are like crouching behind a corner and stuff and maybe whispering or using hand signals. And then they go, and then boom, artillery would start exploding around them, or that scene where they're in the Ardennes forest, and, there's very silent, there's snow falling, nothing really happening. And then the tree bursts start happening, and the whole forest explodes. And then it goes back to silence. And I feel like, and that was coming out around the same time frame, wasn't it?
Actually, I saw, I think it might have been in the making of, where he did say he wanted this to be the Star Wars Band of Brothers.
Oh, yeah. Band of Brothers was 2001. Okay. So, yeah. Okay. Yeah. So I think he was definitely influenced by it. And if you say he mentioned it, then, yep, I can see where that came from. Yeah.
And this, to me, this strikes me as like this group of guys became, the kind of what the special squad all around Obi-Wan was later in the Clone Wars or the Bad Batch. Like the whole concept behind having a team like this spoke to, okay, well, we could do because a lot of the clone trooper stuff is sort of faceless army. And we get a lot of that from this. And that's part of their quietness, their non-talking. That's a piece of it. But then you can see, they're down, they're specialized groups. There's certain people that have certain roles and they can act like a squad. And I love how terse he is with Obi-Wan, and Obi-Wan will say something just like, yes, Commander. No, Commander. Yes, Commander. And
I have to mention that are you referring to the guy in red? Because he keeps getting promoted and demoted throughout the entire sequence. It's a continuity error. I don't know if you guys caught it. Obi-Wan first refers to him as a sergeant. The next time he addresses him, he's commander. And then the next time Obi-Wan addresses him, he is captain. So now I believe in the Mark I clone armor, red does signify that you're a sergeant. In the early clone armor, the colors actually meant rank before it meant unit affiliation. So I think that guy is supposed to be a sergeant, but I love how they missed the continuity error where Obi-Wan keeps referring to him as different ranks. Is hilarious.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. That's just Obi-Wan not understanding the military.
Or not caring what that guy's rank is.
That's right. You're
just a clone, whatever. Just so sad, but yeah. So do you guys have anything else we didn't cover in this first arc of 2D animated Clone Wars that we want to discuss before we begin to wrap things up?
No, the only thing I thought of was just looking at the stills. I'll flip through and just look at still shots. Man, that would make a great calendar. It's just amazing. Some of the ship design and the layouts are just gorgeous. So the artwork on this, I say, take the time and enjoy it. Watch it frame by frame.
Yeah. I really, there's this single interaction between Anakin and Padme in this. It's pretty close to the beginning. It's where General Kenobi's entire force is leaving Coruscant, and I'll try not to go into how terrible it is to land an entire bunch of spaceships like that and then take off again, but I won't. but him like flying up to that certain level and seeing her and putting his hand on the window and her putting her hand on the window.
Yes.
It was better than 90 some odd % of the scenes with both of them in it in the Clone Wars or Attack of the Clones.
Yes. Yeah.
It was done, and it wasn't much, but it was done really well. And immediately, like, my daughter is like, "Are they married?" And I'm like, "Yes, but secretly." And she's like, "Oh." Like you managed to convey all that in roughly 8 seconds.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Not the really like gear grindingly awful dialogue in the scene where they're near that fireplace.
Not the floating fruit.
Right. Well, no, this was after that.
Yeah, that one.
Yeah, that
the roll in the hay, the discussion about sand. Like, there's no
discussion about totalitarianism after rolling in the hay, and all that weird stuff. So yeah. On that note, I guess. But no, the only other thing I wanted to mention is that in this. At this point, they are still keeping up the pretense that they have managed to fool the audience that Palpatine and Sidious are two different people.
Yes.
They are still keeping up that pretense. Even like they go so far as to make Sidious's teeth really crooked and messed up when Palpatine's teeth are not. And I'm like, what? Why? No one is the only
Which
person
plays into the book that was right before the third movie. I forget the title, but I remember reading it and just seeing how the deception was so well played out that they just couldn't see that yes, these two people are one.
Yeah, they would. The show will drop this pretense by the next, section that we get to, but in spectacular fashion. But
yes,
but yeah. Until that time, we'd like to take a moment to thank a few of our patrons, including Christopher L., Jarrett B., Guy C., David B., and Erica P. Their generous donations help us to create the Secrets of Star Wars and all of our shows here at StarQuest, and you can join them at sqpn.com/give. And we'd like to hear from you, our listeners. What are your thoughts on Genndy Tartakovsky's 2D animated Clone Wars microseries? You can let us know by sending us an email at starwars@sqpn.com. You can hit us up on all our social media pages or leave a comment on our channel at the StarQuest Discord server, which you can find at sqpn.com/discord. Until next time, Pat Mason, thank you for joining me in sharing the secrets of Star Wars.
Oh, you're very welcome. Thanks for having me on.
And Kathryn Laffrey, thank you as well.
Thank you. There you go. My silent pause.
Until next time, I am not 2D animated, Thomas Salerno. Thank you for listening to the Secrets of Star Wars on StarQuest.
Here's another show on the StarQuest Network you're sure to enjoy. Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World. Find the show wherever fine podcasts are found or at sqpn.com/mysterious.